In 1620, a group of 102 passengers boarded the Mayflower from Europe and were headed for the Americas. And their goal was to go to Jamestown. They were headed there because some of them wanted religious freedom, and others were looking for economic opportunities. Of those 102 passengers, 37 of them were Puritans. These were people who were definitely looking for religious freedom as they were persecuted any place they ended up in Europe. They were headed for Jamestown because Jamestown was already an established colony or an established British settlement. And what happened was they got blown off course and ended up in, many of us believe, Plymouth, but it was actually Cape Cod. The ship was battered. They just couldn't go any further, so they decided we better just stop here. And you know the rest of that story. What does this have to do with the Amish? I wanted to do a video where we could find out, when did the Amish come to America and what are the conditions in America when they got here? They obviously did not come over on the Mayflower, as those were the Puritans. The Puritan faith is very strict. Like the Amish, they were part of the Protestant Reformation. The Protestant Reformation, you probably remember hearing stories about Martin Luther, who left the Catholic Church. So that was around 1517. And what ended up happening from him leaving the church, many other people separated from the Catholic Church as well. And there was a lot of it was due to all the rules and the customs. Some of them left because of infant baptism. So each group had their reasons for leaving. The Puritans didn't leave till about 1533. So here we have a group of them now starting their colony in 1620 in Massachusetts. The Amish were part of the Protestant Reform, but they started out as part of the Anabaptist group. You can see that here on the chart. What is the Anabaptist group? The Anabaptist group was a movement who rejected Catholic, Lutheran, and Reformed practices of baptism. So basically, they did not believe in infant baptism or just being baptized to be a member of the church. They believed that baptism was to follow conversion. So that only believers should be baptized. That's what they believed, and that's what they believed to be part of the New Testament. So that was the big reason they left. Not all Anabaptists are Amish. Other groups that fall into this category are Mennonites, Hutterites, Brethren in Christ, and Brethren groups that began in Schwarzensaal, Germany in 1708. So those are many of your Anabaptist groups, and you'll see some similar behavior within those religious groups. I wanted to very quickly describe what kind of religious group the Puritans were, because they were not Anabaptists. They were not leaving the church for the same reasons as the Amish did or the Anabaptists did. The Puritans were members of a religious reform movement known as the Puritanism. That arose within the Church of England, and it was later, like I said, in the 16th century. They believed the Church of England was too similar to the Roman Catholic Church, and they should eliminate ceremonies and practices that were not rooted in the Bible. And they were a very, very strict group. All right, let's get back to our Amish friends. The first documented case of an Amish group or Amish settlement wasn't until 1736 in Berks County, Pennsylvania. Now, this is where the Hostetler massacre took place, and I did do a video on that, and I have that link listed above if you want more information about that massacre. Why did they not come until almost 100 years after the Pilgrims? When the Reformation happened, many of your Anabaptist groups were spread out from their original origin. A lot of them came out of Switzerland. They were persecuted, and many of these persecuted Protestants started to migrate to other countries where they felt like they were safe. So a lot of your Amish ended up in Germany. Earlier, I stated that many people were leaving their country to come to America for various reasons. One was obviously freedom to practice the religion, but some were coming for economic opportunities. And then others were just coming because of political reasons. So when this first documented group of Amish came from Germany, they were coming in with their fellow German neighbors. And they ended up in Pennsylvania because William Penn embraced freedom of religion, and he was offering that to people for them to come to his colony. Before I go into detail about why the Amish chose Pennsylvania, I wanted to give you a little bit of history about the 13 colonies that were already established when the Amish came and what the world in America looked like at that time. Virginia was the first colony established. That was in 1607. And I want you to here's a list where you can see New York, 1626, Massachusetts, 1630, Maryland, 1633, Rhode Island, 1636, Connecticut, 1636, and then New Hampshire and Delaware were added in 1638, North Carolina, 1653, South Carolina, 1663, New Jersey, 64, Pennsylvania, 1682, and then Georgia 1732. So here we have our established colonies. Remember, the Amish didn't come till 1736, so all 13 colonies were already established. What is very interesting, I have mentioned it before, many people came for religious freedom, but there was something interesting I discovered as I was reading about the Amish. Many of the colonies had an established religion within their colony, and yet here they have people coming to the colonies to get away from persecution, yet persecution was happening right in the colonies as well. The Quakers, for one, were sometimes persecuted the most, and they weren't allowed to even move to some of the colonies. What were some of the religions that were in the colonies? Let's go back to Virginia. They were basically Anglican, Church of England. Now, a lot of people were trying to leave the Church of England, yet they brought that with them in some of the colonies. New York, the Dutch Reformed churches and the French Protestant and Lutherans tended to settle there. Massachusetts, mostly Puritan. Maryland, mostly Catholic. Rhode Island is interesting. They were the first that had no religion established for the colony. So they allowed Quakers and Jews and anybody that wanted to come. And those, like I said, were the most denied groups in the other colonies. Connecticut was separatist Puritan. New Hampshire had mostly congregationalism, and they were taxed by the British Empire and had to send taxes back. So was the Anglican Church. So they would get taxed, and some of them had to send it back to the British, to the king, and some of them had to pay their taxes to the pastors of their churches. They were ordered to do this. It was, if you remember, in the United States, we now have separation of religion and state, and a lot of it came from this. Just interesting facts. Delaware were mostly Lutheran, Quakers, and Baptists. North Carolina was the Church of England again, and they did allow others, but their official state or colony religion was the Church of England. South Carolina, Church of England, and then New Jersey. They were the first settlers to allow. That's where the first Jewish settlement settled, was in New Jersey. I want to skip Pennsylvania for a minute and jump down to Georgia. Georgia was also an established Church of England, but they did have many Puritans, Lutherans, and Quakers in their colony. So very diverse throughout the 13 colonies, all these different religions, but not every colony allowed every religion. It was very interesting. Now, what about Pennsylvania? What was so special about them? Why did the Amish this group of Germans want to go to Pennsylvania? And again, William Penn, he said, I have true religious freedom. It wasn't unusual to find Quakers, Anglicans, Dutch Calvinists, German Lutherans, and many Christians who had been persecuted in England, including Presbyterians, Baptists, and Catholics. So Pennsylvania was truly a place for people to go to avoid that persecution. And here we are with our first Amish settlement in Burke County in 1736. Today, you've probably heard of Lancaster County in Pennsylvania, and it's considered the largest Amish establishment in the United States, and it's probably the largest community. There's well over 31,000 Amish people living in that area. From there, many of them have spread out into Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, and across the United States. Now, I have one more fact I want to give you before we end the video. Many people have always asked, why are Amish people called Pennsylvania Dutch? Well, when they immigrated into Pennsylvania, they came with their peers. Like I said, there was thousands of Germans that came at the same time. And the German population was notorious for having the same customs, the food. They were easy to identify, you might say. The way they dressed, kind of like the Amish are today. They didn't dress like that, but the German in general during this time period, you could point them out. You could tell by the way they dressed, by the way they behaved, by the way the foods that they ate and things like that. So people started calling all of the Germans Pennsylvania Dutch collectively. And because the Amish happened to immigrate with that group of people, that name stuck with them. And what's interesting, Germans in general in the United States are not easily identifiable like they were back then, but our Amish community is. So I just found that an interesting fact that I thought I would end with.